All right, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Zero to Hero Fireside Series. Today, I have an extremely special guest. My friend Lenny Blum is on the other side of the line, and I can't do Lenny's intro justice, but he's made a huge impact on my career. Early on, when I was at Dropbox, he was my first enterprise customer, and he taught me a lot about not only how things work at NBC Universal when we partnered with them, but also just how things work within enterprise sales. And so, very excited to have him on board today. Lenny, thanks for spending time. Would love to just start with, tell us about what your role is today and kind of how you got there. I know you're at JP Morgan Chase and Company right now, but you've had a long storied career and history. So if you could just give a short summary, that'd be amazing.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's a pleasure to be on. I really feel honored for you to reach out, and I always learn so much from you, and so happy to be a part of this and happy to take part.
Appreciate that,
Today,
Lenny.
today I'm a managing director at JP Morgan. Been in the identity access management space for 15 years. When we met, I had identity access management. I also focused on work and collaboration tools, and that led me to look at different solutions, different products that included Dropbox, and that's when we met. But before that, I was on the sales engineering side at Oracle. I worked at startups, some pre-startups, some early uh, software companies after working at Oracle. So when I got married, I needed to get off the road, so I went from across the line from sales engineering into operations. So I had a view and experience on both sides of the line, and I know some of the challenges that you were facing uh,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
when we
definitely.
worked together.
Yeah, I think you had like a very special empathy towards me, right? Because I was also figuring it out in a lot of ways. And Dropbox, in many ways, had no business being in the enterprise space, right?
Right,
So you really
right.
coached us through as an organization, actually, because you met with our co founders, our executives as well. What does it take to take a consumer brand and make it enterprise mature and enterprise ready? Um,
Yeah.
can you talk to us about, obviously I came from the Dropbox world, but how else have you engaged with sales teams? Was it mostly, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of enterprise sales teams as well.
Yeah.
Like at what juncture were you kind of meeting with sales teams and what was that like? Like can you tell us number of vendors, like specific vendors if you
Oof.
can, and give us a sense for, where you would come into the conversation?
Oh my God. Many vendors, I can't enumerate them from large companies to small companies. I would be, depending on what kind of solution, what kind of problem we're trying to fix. It was either a mature vendor or an up-and-coming vendor. I think you kind of nailed it in bringing the consumer technologies into the enterprise. I think one of the key things that brought us together was seeing the opportunity for that, both for me on my side, what that would do from an enterprise standpoint. I mean, I don't know if you remember the user interfaces of the 90s. We call them Battleship Gray. Uh, the amount of training that you would need to do to learn how to use an enterprise software was huge. And so being aware and of the impact of consumerization into the enterprise was something that um, was very apparent to me. In the previous experience, I worked on um, at NBC. I worked on the Olympics, and one of the things that I worked on was social. When Facebook came out in 2007, we actually uh, ran the first social application on 2008 in the Beijing
Hmm.
website, and also with Twitter. And for me, that was kind of a clear sign of the impact of consumer technologies into the enterprise. So I saw the power of that
Hmm.
into the business, actually. We built this application called the Vancouver Twitter Tracker.
Wow.
Um, and
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
they,
that was probably like before its time at the time, right?
yeah, no, it was a partnership. Again, it was a great partnership with a woman by the name of Chloe Sladden, who headed up the media at Twitter. Um, and we had a great support team at Twitter who actually went down to significant fame both at Facebook and Instagram and now OpenAI. Um, so, but again, it's kind of this vision of saying, oh my God, this technology, this approach can really change how we work together,
Hmm.
how we collaborate, how we present content. And so I knew that it would be a generational change, a systemic change for the company. And Dropbox really had that focus. Now, um, the first call that we had into Dropbox didn't go into you, and I didn't make it, so there's always some luck involved.
Hmm.
And I don't remember the exact words, but it was a horrible experience.
Mm.
To the point in which the person said, this will never happen.
Wow. I had no
Um,
idea. I don't know if you ever told me this part of the story, actually.
no, I didn't. Um, because it wasn't me, and you never know. It's part of it is hearsay, but it's kind of like, hey, we wanted to talk to Dropbox, and someone gave a call, and they said, well, uh, you know, go to the website and figure it out, or kind of it was kind of a redirect
Sure.
uh, that didn't really lead to anywhere. And um, I think it was not, the team was starting to get built out.
Hmm.
But in this, when you're looking at this kind of change, there's always, and I'm noticing now throughout my career is this objective, this alignment that's critical, right?
Hmm.
Um, uh, you from your side and my from my side, both very different backgrounds, very different objectives. I'm sorry, same objectives, but very different challenges.
Sure.
Um, and I think that because of the alignment of the objectives, it was easy to establish alignment, but also a relationship occurred after that. And I was just talking to a friend of mine this week, and it was kind of fun and different that you can say, yes, he was my customer, or he's my sales rep, but I do consider you a friend.
Yeah. Me too.
And it's kind of cool because you're sending that at work, and even in kind of like vendor customer relationships, like that is unique. So I think a lot of that has to do with you yourself, Peter, and what you bring
Appreciate that. Thanks so much.
to the
Yeah,
approach.
yeah, that means a lot, Lenny. I guess diving in, it's always strange to look at myself from the third party, but that's part of this conversation too. So, what was it about those initial interactions? I know you said like getting to alignment, but and I'm sure you work with other great salespeople too. How does that experience differ from what is traditionally out there? Like, what tactically is
Yeah,
happening where you were like, okay, this team gets it, and I feel like even though they're a consumer brand in Dropbox, we can get to a enterprise level agreement. Like, can you unpack a
yeah.
little bit what that felt like?
Yeah, no, and it's interesting when you understand sales and that you have kind of like product fit in which you're trying to get the product to fit to the enterprise, or you have uh, and basically you're trying to change the product to fit to the enterprise, or how do you get the enterprise to understand the product,
Hmm.
and you're going to have both scenarios, and you have different skills in both sides, right? And how do you either listen to the customer and relay the communications back to the product and have them kind of demonstrate that fit. I think what you were able to do that worked well for us is that you were able to help us understand the product, and also there were a couple of blockers really around security that were important to NBC at the time, that you were able to help Dropbox understand how that fit into the roadmap. So I wouldn't necessarily call it product fit because the product was the same, but in the consumption of the product and some of the requirements, you were able to navigate and influence both sides in bridging that gap.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, we didn't even have single sign-on actually when we started talking.
Remember?
So that was a huge effort, right? Because the engineers who were working on that were also learning about the concept, SAML and all
Right.
of that, right? So I remember that vividly. But I think the other thing you said there was really important and something I coach into founders, which is if you're going to sell into the enterprise, you have to be transparent not only about your strengths, but also your gaps. And we did have a lot of gaps in the product, right? If you think about our main
Yeah,
competitor, Box, who had sold General Electric, where you also worked at, right, for a period of time, the Box reps were pitching all these security features, watermarking of like shared links, all of this.
yeah,
And we had to be very open, you as well within NBC, to be like, hey, by the way, if we're gonna compare Dropbox along those lines, they're gonna lose 100% of the time. But
that's
remember what we're
correct.
buying them for. It's the power of the sync engine, right? And it's the
That's
power
right.
of on-the-go media files, which a lot of times are large and can't be dropped. So I think that kind of like
Hmm.
storytelling is something you really helped me with. And I felt like we had to say no a lot more than we said yes on what Dropbox could do. But ironically, that led to the deal, right? Do you agree? That's kind of how
Yeah.
I.
I know, I
Yeah.
agree completely. The thing I'm smiling is my memory is not as good as yours, but you're spot on. Uh, and no, you're spot on, right? Like there's in our jobs, right? Or even the deal. There's things that are going to get you to lose the deal. There's things that are nice, and then there's things that are going to make you win the deal, right? And transparency is an approach, but it's fundamental to that. And if you understand the 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 one thing that is going to be a game changer, double down on that. And so the thing that Dropbox had, there was two things. It wasn't just the sync engine, but the sync engine was uh, incredible, right? Like the ability to sync large files effectively, enabled for an ease of use that just made things happen, right? And uh, the example in large media files is one, but the thing that you know the showing the pain of that, like if it doesn't sync well, now you have colluded versions, you have versioning, you don't know which one was working. So there's a lot of value to that, but being able to understand and clearly understand that is very helpful, was very helpful in general, was very helpful to get some of the key customers, influential customers internally as well.
Totally.
Because, when I sold the tool internally, the first customer was what I think it was
Yeah.
SNL,
Saturday Night Live. That's right.
and
Yeah.
and and they, they're artists. They're not going to go to training to learn how to use a tool. Um, and oh, by the way, it's really important for those videos not to get out and see them before they go on to YouTube, for example. I think it was the time of Dick in a Box, actually.
Oh yeah. That's right.
Um,
Yeah. 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 I do remember that. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yep.
um, but it's interesting because that's a game changer. Now, NBC is not a bank. I think also find your customer, right?
Hmm.
Like, for JP Morgan, security would be a deal breaker
Of course. Yeah.
um,
And at the
on
time,
that. So,
yeah, that's why we didn't focus on kind of the heavily regulated, right? And that's also
right.
another great learning that I try to impart on my founders too, is you don't need to sell the world initially when you're getting off the ground, right? You need to find an acute pain point that people are willing to pay for. and NBC Universal had this
That's
pain
right.
point of shuttling around large media files.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. And that was a pain point,
yeah.
right? And it's interesting. The other, some things that you didn't know about is, there were other document sharing tools at the time. I don't even remember some of them. They don't exist anymore.
Well, I
Um,
can rattle
but
off a few. I think Ignite was there, if you remember them, right? I think.
no, I don't. But I feel like there were three, and some of them had contracts with
Oh
NBC.
wow. Okay. Yeah.
Um,
So we were unseen
but
some of them too. Yeah.
yeah, so but they had some use cases as marginal, and it wasn't really a platform. They were really focused on a specific use case, and so they didn't really have the support of the business. Another thing that was interesting, and I got to give him credit, is our CISO, you know, at the time at NBC Universal. He understood that the risk is a moving target, right?
Mm,
And there wasn't, yes, there's a base level that needed to be met with single sign-on, but he also understood that the feature, the capability was going to change over time. So
mm.
getting a commitment, getting a partnership, um, and an alignment, and the importance of those was important, and it is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes
So I
sense.
think he was an important stakeholder from my side, um,
Yeah, I remember you telling
as
me
well.
about those conversations, and I didn't interface with him as much, but you did, I feel like, such a good job internally, kind of telling that talk track. And then we did, of course, have to
Yeah,
have a few roadmap conversations where we did commit to certain baseline functionality we need to roll out pretty quickly, right? So I think
yeah.
all those conversations were very productive. Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit because there's two stories I talk about all the time with you. One is a little bit more fun, and it's like our Korean barbecue journey.
Oh my God.
And so, for those of you who don't know, but I feel like I've said this story several times per client, and so like my clients are probably getting sick of hearing the story by now. But a few things, like I was actually nervous about taking you out to Korean barbecue because at the time I was shaping my identity in sales, and my default kind of go to was let me just take clients to a nice fancy like steakhouse with a bunch of suits in it to impress the client. But on this particular evening, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to lean full into my identity and culture and, show Lenny my full self. And so we went to Korean barbecue. I feel like we had an amazing time. We went several more times after that. And
Yeah.
every meal, I feel like I learned so much about you, but also about MBC. And those were like pseudo coaching plus get to know you sessions. So tell us now about your kind of, from your vantage point, what that experience was like and kind of the impact that it had.
Well, there's a couple things that you and I have in common. And one of them is our love of good
Yeah.
food. Uh, and so being introduced to Korean barbecue for me was awesome. To the point in which my kids now love Korean barbecue.
Love that.
I've celebrated birthdays in some of the places that you took me to with my family. I it's been a value add, just from a personal side. From my side, the genuineness, the transparency of you and came through, right? And I never knew that you even considered that. For me, when I heard this on a video recently, I almost felt bad because I like I just get so much more from you as you like this side of it, and improved and grew myself and my family so much, right? Like the value, to me, has been huge. And it's interesting in this give and take, right? In a relationship, there's give and take always, right? You credit me for a lot of of things that I was able to mentor and but I never thought of it like that,
Wow.
right? And it was for me it was not me being the mentor or me being the customer. It was more of a relationship, and I think that was part of it.
Yep.
And so it's interesting to me because I think the genuineness, the transparency, the honesty is a critical aspect of forming a relationship, and forming a relationship is critical in sales
Hmm.
because there always is a time in which there's a hard part of it,
Yes.
right? Whether you need to share some tough news or work through a hard issue. And if you have a relationship, you can communicate it, there's a chance that you can get through it.
Hmm.
If you don't, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's such a great
Um,
point. And there's so many detractors that you had to deal with probably at NBC Universal, right? Being the first one to really see the innovation path of a company like Dropbox. Because, we now talk about consumerization of IT as if it was like a foregone thing, but there are a lot of, I think, folks who didn't believe that would be the right path for enterprise software. So the second story, segueing into the second story that I talk about a lot, and I might remember the details more than you actually, because it was a little bit of a nerve wracking situation for me. But we had gone through this full day of you meeting with like Drew, Arash, Aditya at the time was
yeah,
our CTO. Ilya, I think, was head of product. And I was like so proud of myself for getting all these executives together to like speak with you and the team. Because I
yeah,
think one of the things you mentioned was access was really important to like the visionaries, right? And so
yeah,
this was like me wanting to do that and to show you that you really did have the full team on board. It wasn't just me going into it and talking. So
yep,
as the day was ending, this was at 185 Berry Street near the San Francisco Giants Stadium.
yeah, I remember
You
that.
were leaving, and I think your car was already waiting. So it was kind of a little bit maybe of like a rush situation. But you said, I have one more question to ask you. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. Like, I'm exhausted. I just want to go get a drink. And here this guy is throwing in a curveball, right? And you said, who is your largest customer? And I wrote about this too, as you know, right, on social media.
Yeah,
And for a split second, because at the time, I don't know if you knew, but all these PLG consumer companies would slap on logos on their website, even if they
hmm,
didn't have a formal contract. They'd be like, oh, yeah, sure, we
right,
have NBC Universal, but little do you know, it's just, five people, like, on a team in the basement using their tool, right? So a
yeah,
lot of the kind of traditional training was like just talk about the marketing language, but what I didn't want to do was I didn't want to lie, because I could have said maybe like CBS or Turner Broadcasting or Disney, because we definitely had users there, but it just would have been a flat out lie in terms of the enterprise partnership conversation.
yeah,
So I told you it was National Geographic. They had 2,000 employees at the time. And then weeks later, you left. I forgot to get feedback on what you thought about my answer. But I basically said something along the lines of like, they have media files too, but you would be like the very first Fortune 500 customer, right, to sign
yeah.
with Dropbox for Business. And so, can you talk to me about that? Do you remember that? Or I know I reminded you of it, but
I
and then the
I
follow
remember the
on,
process. So
yeah, and then you
yeah,
you said something weeks later to me as well that that was the right answer. But yeah, tell me about that.
yeah. Look, it's an interesting thing, right? Because and you kind of set it up correctly in that we're both trying to push change on both sides of the organization, right?
Hmm.
From your side, from a consumer company going into the enterprise, and from my side, an enterprise customer going into, starting to adopt consumerization, consumer technologies. And yes, we were ahead of the curve on both sides. I think you're going to find that in customers, you're going to find that in people, and sometimes that is required because there's big amounts of change, big amounts of faith that need to be established on both
Yep.
sides. And so what you're selling is not just the product that you're just buying off the shelf, you're also selling the journey.
Hmm.
And in the journey, it's a relationship, right? And it's a little bit of what I was just going to before. talking about before, where the relationship matters, right? You know that you're going to have to do 10, 5, 40 things in order to get to where you want to be. And you know that out of those, some of them are going to be easy, some are going to be medium hard, and some are going to be hard. And out of those hard ones, you want to have trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for me, a critical aspect of these, it doesn't apply to everything, right? Like you're buying an Oracle database, you don't need to trust your Oracle sales rep. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Yep, yep, yeah,
right? It's a product, you know what you're getting.
yep,
This is different. You're launching a company, you're driving great amounts of change on both sides, right?
yep,
And so there is a little bit of faith that needs to be, spent.
totally.
And so, and that capital for faith is, for me, was transparency. That worked for me.
Yeah. So you
Um,
weren't actually. So it's so interesting because I could have gone the other direction maybe, but I guess what you're saying is you weren't looking for, am I going to be in good hands because other my peers have signed up for Dropbox? You
right.
were looking for, can I trust the organization? Across multiple
That's,
dimensions.
that's correct. I think the answer today would be very different, right? Dropbox has all these enterprise features, and it's a different, like you said, the world has uh, bought, and they understand the benefit of the consumerization of technology in the enterprise.
Yeah, yeah. Makes
Um,
sense. Makes sense. Yeah, that was such a critical moment. And what you said was, I like being the first patient, which could have a lot of different implications. But I think you are like more of a risk taking leader and executive, which I
yeah,
think is probably a
yeah,
breath of fresh air because you're usually working at large companies, right? Like Capital One, JP Morgan, NBC Universal. So where do you get that, right? Like, is that just, who you are, or are you more conservative in other kind of lines of business where I don't, where I haven't interacted with you? Like, what is,
I need to think about that.
yeah, yeah, what is that
No,
like?
I, it's the short answer to that is I'm a problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a problem solver.
Yep.
And I like solving, and providing value to the business. And a lot of times when you look at how to solve it, the answer that you have today is sometimes or many times not the right answer.
Yep.
Um, and so I am uh, always trying to search for, is there a better way to do something that normally leads to some innovation and some, I don't know, a lot of change in the organization. So I am very much focused around how can we do things better, faster, cheaper.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think that gave us a big level playing field, at Dropbox. So again, I'm
Yeah,
super grateful to you. So I appreciate you, Lenny. Okay, so
same.
as we close up, I would love to just, maybe you can end with any final words of wisdom you might have for startup founders, because a lot of the folks who are going to listen to this are in that stage of 0 to 10 customers. They grapple with a lot of the same things I grappled with
Yeah,
at Dropbox with regards to, how do you react, how do you pitch, how do you go through those tough conversations that you alluded to. So yeah, what final words
yeah.
of wisdom do you have for startup founders out there selling to the NBCs or the JP Morgans of the world?
Um, I think um, I think the value proposition is key, right? And there's a trade-off between value proposition and pain and risk,
Mhm.
that is important to understand and what you're trying to sell. And I think navigating through through that triangle uh, takes analysis and listening. Um, and there's some things that, in my opinion, work better than others. I think a lot of the stuff that you talk about, Peter, is spot on. It used to be purely relationship sell, in which it started with IBM. Oh, you can't get fired for picking IBM,
Yeah.
back in the 50s, or, then it was Microsoft,
Yep.
or Oracle at a time. But I think sales today, especially when you're in the startup, there is a couple of different things that make someone say, yes, absolutely, I'm gonna uh, you know, take the plunge. Um, I've seen um, a couple things, right? I've seen incredible technologies, incredible companies, startup companies fail at getting a big company take the risk, um, because the company is not in a position, like it's too much risk. Um, so there is a little bit of what is the perfect customer as well, right? Like, it wasn't just me and you. It was we were at the right place
Mhm.
at the right time. We recognized that, and I think that part is important.
Yep.
Um, we were able to influence, but you have to have people that can be influenced.
Yes.
Um, and so I think there's context becomes really important in that triangle of equation that you're trying to navigate through. The the last part is a little bit of uh, and I find that it works in every layer of life. And again, I think you've talked about this, which is kind of like healthy habits, healthy processes, healthy routines lead to good outcomes.
Hmm.
And as a salesperson, how you pitch, how you structure your communication, how you listen to the pain points, how you have your process to understand and get to, the decision or driving the decision, or I think all those are trademarks of good salespeople, and being able to get to someone to the right mind frame to say, you know what, I'm gonna go with this company, even though no one else has done that before.
Yeah, yeah, love that. Yeah, the value proposition is so important because it's so noisy out there, right? And I like
Hmm.
how you describe like pain is important to identify to qualify, but then to close, you need to be super unique, right? You need
Right.
to have something that nobody else can replicate. And then, yeah, I'm a huge proponent of just the, brushing your teeth every day with sales, meaning that a lot of tasks are mundane and boring in sales actually,
Yeah,
and you don't see the payoff right away. But over time, you could see, a bad sales process decay your business or a great sales process really compound on it, right? So I
100%. Yeah,
completely
that's
agree with
critical.
that. Yeah, yeah. And to do it authentically in a way where prospects don't feel like they're going through a factory, that's a whole nother conversation we can have too, right? But
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I triggered.
No, it's interesting because you could say there's the old image of a sales rep that takes you golfing, and
Yes.
I don't golf. I don't know if you
Neither
golf.
do I. Otherwise, I would have suggested it probably because that
We
wasn't my
probably would have
gig.
got we would have had a fun time, but golf would not have occurred too well. But it's interesting because the relationship didn't start there. I mean, even the dinners, like I don't have dinners with, um, you get to a point too where you have dinners.
Right.
A lot of it is like dating,
Yeah.
right? And so in the process is, and I think we did talk about this at some point about the dating and the marriage and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the beginning, how you get to the, past the door into the room, past the room into the next meeting, those are critical steps. And I think today, different from when we first met, they're a lot more customer driven.
Hmm.
I find that, I don't, you talk about vendors. Um, vendors don't reach out to me. I reach out to vendors.
Hmm.
It's actually interesting many times.
Interesting. And you're
Um,
doing a lot of research up
so
front before you reach out,
it's
right?
a
Yeah.
hundred, yeah.
Yeah.
So, a lot of it is self-service and in the stories that they tell on their product and in the market. I don't know. I get so many emails on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, did you hear about this? Gen AI today's lately
Yeah,
is the whole Gen AI can solve all your problems. Um, and I get at least once a day.
yeah, yeah. And your
Um,
brain cuts
and
off to it, right? You'd rather go to
I
yeah,
don't I don't look at them at all.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I do think Gen AI is one of the most transformational technologies ever.
Yep.
But you know,
Yeah, there's an
I think
execution path that involves like people setting up the right guardrails, right? Yeah. And that's
yeah,
still a little
absolutely.
murky, I
Yeah,
would say. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. No, but it's no,
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm working on that too.
yeah, yeah.
But
Well, I coach a
uh,
lot of AI companies, and so that's like a big kind of theme that comes through is how do you
yeah,
marry the human plus Gen AI and make it a powerful combo without making
yeah,
it too AI driven and too human driven, right? You have to have kind of that happy
yeah,
medium.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Lenny, I could talk to you for hours, as you know, so we're gonna have to continue this over Korean barbecue, part
Oh, I love
10.
that.
At some point we're gonna make it happen. But really appreciate you coming on. Again, I know you're super busy during the day, so thank you as always. And yeah, looking forward to sharing this with founders and also having a quote or two in my book, which I'll share with you.
Awesome, awesome. Peter, thank you so much. It's great to see you, and it's good to see that you're doing well.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Lenny.